For those who don't know and don't have time to look it up, how would you briefly describe the Six-Day War? What is the Six-Day War for dummies?
It's always described as a defensive war by the people who support Israel. I support Israel, but I know that if you start the shooting, then you've started the war. So the Six-Day War was a decisive, smashing defeat for the Arabs because Israel attacked first by air, destroyed the Egyptian and Syrian air forces on the ground, and then with control of the air was able to defeat the Arab armies who were dedicated to the idea of pushing Israel back. And that's when the current illegal borders were established as a result of the 67 war. The Golan Heights, Gaza Strip, the West Bank.
Of course, it's Russia backing all the Arabs, and we're backing Israel. And the Egyptians were fussing because the Brits were, and we were gathering intelligence and then sharing it with Israel, stuff like that. So, well, yeah, we did a lot of that.
They came to Washington 2 weeks before. Abba Eban, the foreign minister, came with them, and he slept at the White House in the Lincoln bed at the invitation of Johnson. So we were very close. We helped mastermind the Six-Day War. The Israeli had their key defense people. We had our key defense people, and they all sat around for about a week. They plotted and planned what was going to happen in that war.
We support Israel. The Russians support all the Arabs, primarily Egypt, Syria, Jordan, the main combatants over there.
And when we decided to arm Israel, the Arabs turned to the only other possible source of arms in the full Soviet Union. Happy to supply them, but we don't want any of your commissars. Thank you very much. That was perfectly clear the whole time.
When Israel took over the other portions of the country, took over the Golan Heights, the Sinai Desert, and part what's now known as the West Bank and Gaza, then that created some real problems and friction problems with Russia and also with the Arabs, and made them go more towards Russia for equipment and things. And some of the Arab countries still haven't forgiven us for that.
Now, we almost got into a war with Egypt at the beginning. As it turned out, the Israelis attacked Egypt, and a radar station in Jordan, which normally really didn't function but was functioning that day, picked this up. And they sent a message to Cairo that Cairo was going to be attacked by the American forces, that the American forces were all on the way to Cairo to bomb them. So with that, Nasser sends out a message to all over the Arab world that he's going to be attacked by the Americans. With that, every Arab country starts getting its hackles up.
That we had a U.S. group of phantoms that were hastily painted over and given neutral uniforms and sent over there to do photo reconnaissance, ostensibly for Israel. And it's only fair to assume that the Russians were doing the same thing.
Because there was a time there when Khrushchev called Johnson in the middle distances, if you want war, you'll get war. It got to be that close.
Johnson stood down, and it turned out that might have been the brightest thing he ever did in his life.
The Russians had 5 submarines, atomic submarines, sitting off of our coast, all ready to launch the bomb.
They had nuke subs off.
They had the nuke subs with nuclear warheads running up and down within 5-6 miles of our coastline. And we knew it. And sometimes we followed them, sometimes we didn't.
I was a Russian linguist. My job was to find out what the Russians were doing and how they were involved.
Russia has always been accused of having a bigger role in all of that part of the world than is justified. People keep pointing out that if it hadn't been for Israel, the Soviet Union would have swept through the Middle East, and that's just blatant nonsense.
Islam is totally opposed to communism. And so were they ripe for the Russians to move into the area? Not really.
Every one of those Arab countries was vehemently opposed to the concept of communism, and they were constantly, even in a place like Iraq, suppressing people who showed any communist tendencies. Russia was playing the role of a spoiler.
There was a group of Tu-95 aircraft. They were airborne surveillance electronics collection platforms. Basically, they were kind of like our B-52s. They were a heavy long-range bomber. But the Russians had pretty well told the world that they were given to the United Arab Republic, and it was UAR crews that were manning them. They were actually Russian troops in UAR uniforms, and they wouldn't let the Arabs anywhere near those planes.
The Egyptian Air Force had this bad habit of being real regular in their routines, so they'd go fly patrols in the morning, come back and land and have morning tea, park neatly on a row on the runway, go in and have morning prayer and tea. And so preemptively, that's how Israel started. They just eliminated the Egyptian Air Force on that day one. Tank Force, day 2, 1 and 2. They were also fighting in Jerusalem. I don't know how secure that had been. There was some fighting along the Syrian border over the Golan Heights. That's one thing we were trying to ascertain by then, whether or not they planned an invasion of Syria.
One of the goals was the Golan Heights. And they were told when they were in Washington 2 weeks before by McNamara and Rusk and so forth, you will not take the Golan Heights, period. We know there's going to be a war, and there are certain things you will not do. You will not start it, but they did. You will not take the Golan Heights, but they did. But Moshe Dayan, for like a lot of generals, don't follow the rules.
Moshe Dayan, the one-eyed leader of the Israeli army in that war, a hero, a national icon for the fact that he led the armies to that crushing defeat of the Arabs.
If they get away with it, like Robert E. Lee did, you're a hero. If you don't get away with it, you're a dog. So Moshe Dayan had defeated the Egyptians in the Sinai, and he took a good portion of his forces from the Sinai under the cover of darkness and had them hit Syria in the Golan Heights. Well, we, of course, would have that. And I think he was afraid that we might contact the 6th Fleet, and 6th Fleet Washington, and stop it. So he went ahead, and he figured he'd get away with it. Most he would have to do is give it up. And he never had to give it up.
Jordan was one of Syria, Jordan, Egypt that was going to shove Israel off in the sea. Now, it started out with Egypt and the Sinai and the tank force and their aircraft and getting wiped out day 1, 2, whatever. Well, back then you didn't have cell phones, so if somebody made a phone call in Egypt and tried to call Jordan, it went on a landline. Well, landlines, like electricity, kind of lose signal over length. And so then it would go to a relay station to get re-amplified and sent on down the line. Well, this NSA group had a guy that sounded just like NASA. And same dialect, you couldn't tell. I mean, even if you had the sophisticated stuff, you couldn't tell it wasn't NASA talking.
Nasser, the leader of the Arab Republic of Egypt, a fiery speaker, a leader, a demagogue, if you wish, if you're on the other side, who was trying to unify the Arab world, and was viewed by the United States as an irritant, if not a threat.
So the original plan was that Nasser's calling King Hussein in Jordan and would probably have said, well, we're getting our butt kicked. You might better stay out of this. It ain't working. Protect yourself. Stay out of it. But instead, we intercepted that nearly in real time and sent on down the deal. Oh, Allah be praised. It's going well. It's a good time for you and Syria to come in. We'll shove Israel off in the sea. So Jordan come into it and got their butt kicked day 1.
Let's be honest. No, let's not go that far. Let's be open. The United States government has been involved in a lot of stuff around the world which nobody talks about. When I had my liaison job with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I used to carry around the locked briefcase with the black cover documents from agency to agency, getting approval for programs which nobody's ever heard about or talked about that America was conducting around the world. Covert actions and what they called vulnerable platform collection programs. And none of those things have come out. all of us took oaths to be quiet about it, and everybody has followed those. None of them were like the Liberty incident, where somebody else did something to us and we were told to shut up about it. That's a whole different category of activity, in my mind.
Yeah.